I don't know where my cell phone is. I loaned my cell phone out. I loaned my car out. Happens to be the same day my ex-girlfriend ends up getting killed and missing. This is not a hard case. This is much more of a solid case than your average African-American defendant in North St. Louis or West Baltimore or Southeast D.C. or Brownsville, Brooklyn is ever going to get. Not a hard case. I just think Adnan is one guilty motherfucker. And my only regret is the great state of Maryland did not give him the needle, because I believe he's a murdering, Sudoku box thieving, girlfriend, ex-girlfriend killing, lowlife, dirtbag, con artist, piece of shit that Sarah Koenig from NPR or whatever the consortium is ate up his bullshit. Guilty as charged.
Hi, I'm Roberta Glass, and today we are going to talk about that low-life, dirtbag piece of you-know-what, Adnan Syed, and the case against him with Alexa. Stay tuned. So when I heard HBO was doing a documentary, a 4-part documentary on Adnan Syed, the first person I thought to talk to about it was Alexa, who I had done a fascinating episode called Nothing Left Undisclosed, My Life in the Free Adnan Syed Cult. You can listen to it on this channel. She had been a diehard supporter of Adnan, and she had a dramatic change of mind, change of heart about it. So, welcome, Alexa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for talking to me about this stuff. So, what did you watch the Case Against Adnan Syed, and what did you think?
The dishonesty just begins immediately. I mean, the title alone, I mean, as soon as you hear the title, you think it's supposed to be really the case against Adnan Syed. It should really be called the case for Adnan Syed.
Right.
Or Adnan Syed is the greatest boyfriend that ever lived on the planet.
Greatest person who ever lived on the planet, I would say.
Boyfriend, oh yeah, and son. Because he helped out his mom's daycare.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it starts with the daycare and his family, and it's
an advocacy piece. It's an innocence advocacy piece, and I found out that it is actually the only reason that it exists is because the rights to Rabia Chaudhry, his advocate's book, was purchased by somebody named Jemima Khan, and this is what the documentary is. It's Rabia's book. It's not a documentary about the case against Adnan Syed. It is an advocacy piece based on Rabia's book.
And yet it's called the case against Adnan Syed, but the most dishonest thing is that the audience never hears the real case against him. What is some of the evidence against Adnan Syed?
It's so complicated, the whole case is, but just to keep it simple, because there's cell phone evidence, and there's Jay's stories, and there's this Asia McClain, and there's so many things going on, but really all you need to know is his own words about that day, his own words and actions on January 13th, 1999, the day that she went missing and killed. And it's a day when, in Serial, he says, absolutely nothing was abnormal about that day for me. There's nothing abnormal about that day. That's why I don't really remember that much.
Right.
But it's not. It's a very abnormal day, and it starts out with him being on early for school. He sees Krista early in the morning, like 7:30, and she makes a note at trial that this is a strange for him to be at school so early. And they walk up to the room Hae is in, where she's interning, and he asks her for a ride after school. He says, my car's in the shop. Krista overhears it. He says, my car's in the shop. Can you give me a ride after school? And Hae said yes. And his car was not in the shop at this time. No, his car was out in the parking lot. He had drove to school. So he says this. He leaves school early. He calls Jay. Well, first, it's Stephanie's birthday also this day, and he gives her a birthday present. And after he gives her the birthday present, he's like, oh, I'm going to call Jay and see if he gave her one, if he got something for her. And he says, oh, I called Jay. He didn't get her anything for her birthday, so then I went and gave him my car. And he's gone with Jay for multiple hours. He's gone from 10:45 in the morning from school until 1:27. He doesn't get back to school until 1:27, like 45 minutes before the day is over. And
wow.
He'd been with Jay, supposedly shopping for this birthday present. And he gets back to school right before it ends. And he says that he doesn't remember, though, anything after. Like, he remembers that he went to track practice at 4:30, but not sure. He's supposed to pick up her cousin at 3:15. So she had to be killed between 2:15 and 3:15. And that's the only time that he doesn't remember where he was at.
Strangely, just during when the state says Hae Min Lee is murdered, he doesn't remember where he is. How convenient.
Exactly, but he remembers, oh, it's Stephanie's birthday, I got her stuffed reindeer, I remember this, I definitely was at track practice, and then after track practice, I went and smoked weed with Jay. Not quite sure, where we went, but we smoked weed until, I remember the cop calling me. I mean, his own words were, he will never forget when the cop calls him, because it's the craziest thing when you're high and you get a phone call from the police. So it's framed, as if he's trying to remember what happened 6 weeks later, as if nobody knew anything about Hae for 6 weeks. But he's asked that very day. The cop calls him. Even before the cop calls him, he gets a voicemail. Krista calls and leaves a voicemail on his phone at, 4:30. Well, at 4:16, she leaves a voicemail for him asking, hey, has anyone seen Hae? Have you seen Hae? I knew you were supposed to give her a ride. Where is she? Where are you? And he listens to that voicemail right away. And then Hae's brother calls at 6:07. He talks to Hae's brother for a minute, and he asks him, have you seen Hae? Do you know where she is? And 2 minutes later, Aisha calls, and he gets an incoming call from Aisha. And she tells him, I told the police to check with you because I knew you were supposed to give Hae a ride. Then, 6:24, Officer Adcock calls him. He talks to Officer Adcock for 4 minutes and 15 seconds where he asks him, where did Hae take you after school? I heard she was supposed to give you a ride. Where'd you guys go? And this is where he denies asking, even though Krista heard him. He told Krista, too, that his car was in the shop, even though it wasn't.
Wow.
And he's like, yeah, she was supposed to give me a ride, but I got caught up doing something after school, and I think she just probably got, bored waiting for me and left, got tired of waiting for me. So it's not just a quick phone call from a cop, which is also super rare to happen and something you clearly would remember, but it's a call that lasts for 4 minutes and 15 seconds where he has to give him his full name, his address, his birth date. He even, before they hang up, Adcock testifies in court that Adnan asked him, is there going to be a police report made about this phone call?
Wow.
This was an extremely important event, and Hae's missing. This girl that is the love of your life and the only girlfriend you've ever had is gone missing without a trace. And this is a responsible girl. This is nothing she normally does or has ever done before. She's very responsible. And she's never seen again. The last thing, you've seen her that day, then you get a phone call from the police about it. She never is seen alive ever again until her murdered, strangled body is found. And you're going to say that there was nothing abnormal about that day? Immediately when the cop calls you, you would think, oh my gosh, when was the last time I saw her? Where was she at? Where was I at? What did we talk about? Did she mention where she was going? Did she mention, anyone's name? You would rack your brain trying to be helpful to come up with, anything you possibly could to help find her. But he says he cannot remember because it was a normal day. He remembers that he was at track, but he can't remember this 1 hour of time. That is the amount of time that you would need, and he's lying about it. He lied about his car. He lied about asking for a ride, because the next time he talks to the police, he says, "Asked for a ride? What are you talking about? I didn't ask her for a ride. I drive my own car to school." That was his words in the police notes. He said he drives his own car to school and would have not asked Miss Lee for a ride.
Right. And Hae Min Lee was murdered in her car. So it's very significant if you were setting up to murder someone in their car to say, "My car's in the shop, I need a ride." I mean, it's crucial.
And during Jay's first interview, when he implicates Adnan, when he says, "I'm coming clean," yeah, okay, it was Adnan that killed her. They said, how was he going to do it? What did he tell you? He said, he told me that he was going to do it in her car and get into her car by saying that he needed a ride because his car was in the shop.
So
Same thing Krista heard him say.
It's really amazing that they asked the audience to suspend their disbelief so intensely. And so it's just really outrageous, off the charts, outrageous. And Serial was.
And then when he's arrested, during Serial, when he's talking about being arrested and how shocked he was just so shocked he couldn't even believe he was a suspect. And again, he doesn't remember that 1 hour of that day, but he knows he was with Jay most of the day. He's arrested. The cops are questioning him, and they say, "Jay told us everything. Adnan, the gig is up. Jay told us what happened." And his words on Serial were, I was thinking, Jay? Jay who? Who are they talking about? The only Jay I know is Jay Wild. Yeah, the guy that you even admit you remember you were with the day that she was murdered. When they're telling you Jay told him everything, you're pretending like who is Jay? Like, how anybody could believe this liar, knowing all of this, I don't understand.
And and they always say his Rabia Chaudhry, who wrote Adnan's story, which was optioned into this 4-part series, always points out, well, Jay can't be believed because he's such a liar. But Adnan has been caught, in multiple lies.
Multiple lies, and then not committing to anything either. Like, there's even notes from his first attorney before he had Gutierrez saying he told that attorney that my alibi is I was in front of the school working on my car. That's what that lawyer has in their notes. So it just changes all the time. And now he says that he remembers being in the library talking to Asia McClain. So it's okay if Adnan lies or doesn't remember things, but if Jay lies or minimizes his own involvement, then that means he can't believe nothing he says can be believed.
What I noticed is that they wanted to seem like they weren't being biased. And there's one point where the French teacher talks about making a questionnaire. And can you talk about the difference between the real story and that story about the questionnaire, the real story and the story they present on HBO?
Yeah, so they do mention that this questionnaire was made, and they only want to talk about that one of the questions on it, which was, where did Hae and Adnan go when they would hook up? And so they mention that he goes to Miss Shab and says, please stop asking questions about me because I don't want my parents to know that I was dating. And meanwhile, his girlfriend is missing. His ex-girlfriend is missing and is nowhere to be found. And he's concerned about his parents finding out he's dating. So he tells her to stop, which they do show, but under that pretense. And then they neglect to mention that the reason he even found out about this is because he found the questionnaire in Debbie's planner and he threw it away. Like, he didn't even say anything to her about it. Like, he just, surreptitiously threw it away. And then goes to Miss Shab and says, stop asking questions.
But they also do make a bunch of, very, pro Adnan kind of points. Like, no one was worried about Hae, except the entire Korean community.
Yeah, except for everyone in the Korean community, except for Krista even saying, at the end of my birthday party when Hae didn't show up, like, I knew something really bad happened. Well, her birthday party was 2 days later. So for everyone to act like, oh, nobody was even worse. She's missing 6 weeks. This popular magnet student with tons of friends who never has done anything like this before is missing for 6 weeks, and they act like people were just so unconcerned. When it shows, do you remember how many people were there at that vigil? All the Koreans?
It was shocking to see that picture for me. I'd never seen it before.
And it was showing newspaper clippings of it and stuff, like search for Woodlawn student continues, and showing pictures of these vigils they're having, but nobody was worried?
Right, and everybody thought she went to California. Wasn't that Adnan's story?
I think that I'm not sure, maybe it was Becky who they think might have said it. Adnan's story was when he first talked to the cop, when he says, yeah, I asked for a ride, but I didn't get one. He says, you should check with Dawn. And Dawn at one point even mentioned California. But I think that it was maybe Debbie that had told Dawn about California.
Thank you for correcting that. Well, we'll get to Dawn in a second. Put a pin in that. Well, and they also are setting up that Baltimore is dangerous. Why do you think they're doing that?
To make it seem like if it's not Dawn, if it's not Jay, then and it's definitely, of course, not Adnan. And if you don't believe it's either of those two either, then it's clearly some stranger, some unrelated, unconnected person who's done this to Hae. Yeah. Even though the dangerous stuff of Baltimore, they're talking about gang shootings, drug-related stuff, like maybe even possibly like sexual assault. None of these things happened to Hae. Hae was abducted and strangled to death in the absence of any other motive. She was not sexually assaulted. She wasn't involved in gangs and drugs. So them talking about how dangerous it is pretty ridiculous and just another thing to just throw at the wall.
And statistically, women are much more likely to be killed by their husband, their boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, ex-husband, someone they know, than a stranger. So
yeah, and if it is a stranger, which is, again, astronomically unlikely, it's a stranger who has some other motive to kill. It's not a stranger doesn't just strangle the life out of you, bury your body, and not steal anything or sexually assault you. That's even more unbelievable.
And they also do a great job of painting Adnan as the most sensitive, greatest person, even if it means outing Hae Min Lee's sexual abuse for no other reason but than to make her convicted murderer look good. What were your feelings watching that?
Honestly, it was the worst part of the entire thing, and I think that they remember the backlash that they got after Serial, with people saying, rightfully so, that Hae was a non-entity of the whole story was amazing Adnan and his innocence, and Hae's barely mentioned. So they decided they were going to talk about her a lot in this, except for the only thing they talk about her in relation to is her relationship with Adnan and how happy she was in it. They have these animations and have somebody reading her diary that has a voice similar to hers. But the only parts of her diary they're having him read is, I love Adnan so much. Adnan is the best boyfriend in the world, making him look amazing. And then bringing up the sexual abuse, the alleged sexual abuse that they claim they heard about was pretty disgusting. I mean,
and also the other point of bringing up her sexual abuse was to make her family look bad.
Yes, that seems to be the theme of the few changes between the documentary and Serial is definitely that one. Instead of making Adnan's family look like the weirdo, controlling, strict ones, now they're making it seem like it's Hae's family. Oh, Hae couldn't have friends over. Hae wasn't allowed to date. And also, apparently they just allowed her to be sexually abused and didn't care.
Didn't care, right. And the most disturbing part of that for me was listening to Adnan talk about the time that Hae broke down in tears and confessed her sexual abuse. And he said, I didn't touch her. I just listened as she wept in a ball. And I thought to myself...
I didn't want to touch her.
Yeah, he didn't want to touch her. And I thought, well, you saved that for later when you wrapped your hands around her neck and strangled the life out of her. Like, what an insulting... I hit the roof. But I wasn't the only one who hit the roof, because I was watching it with my boyfriend, who was supposed to be there as moral support, and he was angrier than I was. He kept asking, well, how did they get their diaries? You know, did they buy them? How can they do this legally? How can they do this? And I thought, well, you know, is this from the court records? And I thought, well, she's dead. She can't sue for, slander now or whatever.
Or refute the things, that they're saying. And if this is a true thing, this sexual abuse, that she said this, obviously she said it reluctantly to a few very close people because she didn't want everyone to know. And then they're just making it this centerpiece of this episode, trying to make her killer look like a good guy. Like, it's so gross. Like, it really is disgusting.
It really is in poor taste. But... that's something that we've come to expect from the Free Adnan supporters or advocates, where they accuse people of murder at the drop of the hat. They change their stories left and right while accusing Jay of being terrible for changing small parts of his stories. First, they said, can you talk a little bit about the changing stories of Adnan's advocates?
It first started out with them saying it was the hashtag Jay did it theory, which was that Adnan had, since it was clear that Jay knew where the car was, because that's, the big thing, too, is that Jay is the one who led the police to the car. During his interview, he knew what she was wearing when she was murdered and the position, where she was buried, and the position of her body, like exactly what she looked like in that grave. So he had all this information, and they said it was because he was the one who actually killed her. He had Adnan's car that day and phone, and that's why the pings happened, and that's how he knew all this, because he's the one who killed Hae. We don't know why, because they never would come up, of course, with a theory, except for when Rabia in her blog accused Hae of doing drugs with no evidence of this whatsoever, and said maybe she was meeting Jay for a drug deal, and he killed her. So that was theory one. And then when that got thoroughly debunked because it's the most ridiculous theory in the entire world, they moved on to her new boyfriend, Don, making it seem like it was him who killed her, saying he forged his time card, because he had an alibi that he was at work and he had his time card to prove it. And they keep alleging that the time card was falsified, and it doesn't matter anyways even if it was real, because it was his mom who was the manager of the store, and that's basically his alibi. So because his mom was his alibi, because his mom was his boss at work, and that means we can't trust anything they say. And so not only is he just as likely to have killed Hae as Adnan, he actually did kill Hae, and Adnan didn't.
Wow.
So there was Don, but then that came to be a weird theory, too, that just didn't add up, and investigators looked into the time. Even the HBO investigators put on Reddit that they looked into the time card thing a lot, because that was like a big theory on like Reddit and stuff. And they said they debunked it. They said there's no way that time card was falsified. So that's not a real thing. And they said then later that it's probably just a non-entity, just somebody who's not even connected to Hae. Could be them. But after saying all these things, we know it's not Jay. Okay, now we know it's not Don. It's probably a stranger. They go back and make, a documentary like this where they're trying to make it look like Don is guilty. They're trying to make it, later I heard that they're going to bring in Jay's ex-girlfriend, and she's going to claim that he beat her up and strangled her at one point.
So they're covering all bases, meaning pick one that you like. It could be any of these, just whatever. It's not Adnan. That's what, whoever it is, not Adnan.
Yeah, it could be anyone else except for, exactly. It could be absolutely anyone but Adnan. But I think the reason that they're not completely, going with one person is because when you try to do that, it falls apart. When you take it all the way, like the Don thing all the way, it falls apart. When you take the Jay thing, the story to the ending, it falls apart. So they can't just go with one story. They have to just hope you don't try to follow one of them to the end, and they just give you so many different theories and so many different people that you're just like, oh, who knows who it was? It could have been Michael Jackson. Did he have an alibi for that day? It could be anyone.
Right. Yeah, I think you're giving them ideas. I don't think they brought up Michael Jackson yet. So
that might be the thing that's saved for episode 4, the episode no one's seen yet.
Right.
That they're having a party for.
Right. Excellent idea. And, one person who has not let go of the time cards is Bob Ruff. Can you talk about him doubling down on the time card evidence?
Apparently, he watched the episode and he made he watched the HBO episode, and then he made an episode of his podcast where he says he is positive. Now, not only does he say, I'm doubling down on the time card being fake, that he's so sure it's fake, he's also saying that he's sure, because they had Detective Massey in the episode talking about the anonymous phone call. And he said he knows that he's lying about that. He's like, he said he's full of shit. Those were his exact words. Detective Massey is lying and full of shit, and he knows that Don's time card was falsified because he's talked to 20 people from Lens Crafters and Luxottica, and they've all told him that if you have 2 time cards that are in front of you for the same pay period, and they have 2 separate employee ID numbers, one of them has been falsified. And it doesn't matter if the actual private investigation company that thoroughly looked into it said it was debunked. It doesn't matter if the police say they thoroughly looked into him and he is not a suspect. Bob Ruff knows all, and he is positive that it was fake.
And do not call him an armchair sleuth. He does not like that, apparently.
I think he said he was offended by being called that.
Yeah, he's offended by calling an armchair sleuth, but he doesn't mind accusing people of murder.
Armchair sleuth should be offended that Bob Ruff was called one. He's worse.
And Bob Ruff doesn't make an appearance in this HBO documentary.
I want to know why, because he's like, I was aware of it and I did some consulting for the documentary, but I didn't end up being in it. But of course he doesn't say why, and I'm hoping it's just because he's such a liar and so off-putting. And he publicly accused Don of being he actually called him out at a gathering, like an Adnan support gathering they had. He got us on Periscope, so it's being live streamed on the internet, and literally said, I firmly believe Don is, I even said his full name, is the killer. And I think maybe that was even too much even for HBO and Amy Berg and her upstanding morals and values.
Right, and let's talk a little bit about what came out about Don and his health in this documentary. That Don, they are accusing a guy of murder who has been disabled since he was 23 and does not expect to live very long. So a guy in really vulnerable health.
A guy in really vulnerable health who I was shocked to hear. I had no idea that he got disabled at 23. I don't know what happened. That's never been mentioned on any of the shows or even on display. I've never heard it mentioned. But what they did say in the documentary was that Don was 22 years old. They said this several times, and that it was creepy and weird. They said, what does a 22-year-old want with someone Hae's age? And just making him look creepy and weird. Don was not 22. Don was born almost to the day 2 years before Hae. He was 20. He was not 22. Not even that 22 would be that bad, but it's still just a blatant lie. And they have to have known that, and they put it in anyway.
Right, and they put in all sorts of things about Hae moving quickly to Don, and Don making moves on her friend after Debbie.
Oh my gosh, that was.
But they don't
include anything.
But they don't include anything about Adnan and his history of using prostitutes. So, he's supposed to be pious and only had this one girlfriend, and but everybody else is sort of has a questionable personality. That's not
They
Adnan.
also neglect to mention that, shocking, another lie by Adnan was that he said that Hae called him the night before she went missing and tried to get back together with him. And I guess that's another example of this being an option from Rabia's book, because she says that same thing in her book. She says that, she says it like it's a fact, that Hae called Adnan the night before and tried to asked him, do you think we'll ever get back together? And trying to, when in reality, it's clear by the phone record, she was with Don all night that night up until almost midnight, gets home, immediately calls him, is on the phone with him until almost 3 a.m, where she's writing in her diary his name hundreds of times. She even writes in there that he's her soulmate, and she's so glad to have him. And she's like, I knew that you were the one for me as soon as I opened my eyes and saw you in the break room. You're my soulmate. I love you. And Adnan calls her 3 separate times. She doesn't answer the first 2 times. Finally, the third time at like 1:30 in the morning, she clicks over and answers the phone, and he tells her his new cell phone number, which she writes down in the middle of her diary, where she's written Don's name over and over again, and hurries up and gets off the phone with them so she can go back to her conversation with Don.
Wow, and he wasn't upset about their breakup at all. He was taking
and why
it well.
lie? Why would you lie and say she called me trying to get back together?
Right. I mean, that's only a lie you create when you care. When you care and you felt slighted, correct?
Right, and you don't want it to look like, you want to try to make yourself look as innocent as possible, and,
It's disgusting. And, let's talk about some of the personalities behind this. So the book was optioned by Jemima Khan Goldsmith. Can you say a little bit about her?
So she is, Rabia refers to her as the Princess Di of the Middle East, and she was married to the Prime Minister of Pakistan at one point, and she owns a production company called Instinct Production, and I guess they have produced they're like a left wing, like left wing documentaries, and
right.
I think she's like an activist of sorts.
Right. She used to be the editor at Vanity Fair UK. She produced the Alex Gibney WikiLeaks documentary, and she had her own run-in with the law in Pakistan in 1999 when she was caught with some illegal antique tiles and fled Pakistan for fear of incarceration. And then when a new regime came in, they said, oh, the tiles were not antiques. They weren't what we thought. They were mistaken. They're just regular old tiles that are perfectly legal. And the ban on her was lifted. So that's a kind of interesting thing. The second person is the director, Amy Berg.
Oh, yes. Amy Berg from the West of Memphis fame.
I often wrongly refer to it as the third West Memphis bias documentary, but it's the fourth.
Yes, the fourth.
Yes, that's the fourth, not the third, the fourth, which was released after they got out. It clearly has no problem accusing another grieving stepfather of murder. It's produced by the twice convicted murderer himself, Damien Eccles. And
it's the movie that Rabia watched that made her contact Sarah Koenig. She says she watched West of Memphis, and she immediately decided to contact Sarah Koenig and get the ball rolling on Adnan's story. Yeah,
and she also directed An Open Secret, which was about pedophilia in Hollywood. It was a controversial documentary. Part of her contract was to promote the documentary, but so she was hired, hired to direct it. She doesn't do passion projects. She's like a documentary director for hire, And she filmed the documentary, and when it came time to promote it, it was so controversial, a little bit of pressure came down on her, and she abandoned it. And that will tell you something about someone who can listen to victims of abuse, tell their stories, and feel no obligation to them, and only an obligation to herself and protecting herself.
And I think making money, protecting herself and making money is clearly all she seems to care about.
Because, boy, and we saw Rabia Chaudhry at Adnan's advocate's house. Now that her book has been sold, and boy, have her circumstances changed, huh?
What a nice house, huh? They start off with the daycare at Adnan's parents' house, and then they go up. Because Rabia's pregnant. She's showing like the nursery that she's gonna have, and it does look nice.
Talking about Uncle Adnan.
The murder business is booming.
It really is. The innocence fraud movement is just, it's run on the blood of the victims, the blood money of the victims, and it's just a nonstop machine, money-making machine.
Good news for any of your listeners who would like to donate. They had closed his campaign, the fundraiser, because they thought he was about to get out any minute. But now that the new court ruling came out, they have relaunched a fundraising campaign, so you can donate if you'd like.
Let's talk about that court ruling. What happened? It was Maryland's highest court. What did they say?
That was amazing. Like, when the first ruling came out in 2016 that they were going to give him a new trial based on the cell phone evidence, the state had appealed that decision, and the next court said, no, we're going to, it was ineffective assistance of counsel, not now for the cell phone evidence, but because Christina Gutierrez never contacted Asia McClain. And she should have at least, even if we know she's a lying liar and her story's not true, she still should have contacted her. So technically, that was ineffective assistance. Well, that was appealed as well, and it went up to the state of Maryland's highest court, their highest appeal, Supreme Court, and they ruled in a 4-3 decision that he will not be getting a new trial. They reinstated his conviction, and this all came out on last Friday, literally the Friday before the documentary comes out. So it was like just perfect timing to get great news.
Right. And so we've talked about quite a few cases together since I interviewed you for your episode. And you talk about Ryan from Cold Case Mysteries, his theory of a haystack and a piece of hay. Oh, yeah. Can you explain that? He's the one who changed my mind. Yeah. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So that was that episode that he did about Adnan, that first, like when I heard it, it just, blew up my whole world because I was such a diehard advocate for his innocence, but just hearing the way, that he described the case, just like I did at the beginning when we first started talking, like just, Adnan says this, but this is what really happened. This was that day. And he says, when you're innocent, all you have to do, like, if you're guilty, you're trying to find the needle in the haystack to try to get out of jail. Like, if you're innocent, though, all you have to do is point to the stack of hay. Like, and that's what these documentaries and the serial and undisclosed, they're trying to look for the needle in the haystack because they have no stack of hay to point at. That's why they're just trying to look for anything they can to try to just cast doubt. Not to prove that Adnan didn't do it, because they could never do that, but to just try to cast any kind of doubt on the evidence that's against him. Because, they don't have they can't, if he was innocent, they'd be able to point at this, and this, and it'd be very obvious. But there's no stack of hay. The stack of hay is full of his lies and contradictions and all the evidence against him, which is a lot.
So what should we expect in the next, we have about 3 minutes left, what should we expect in the next 3 episodes?
Well, nobody, like I said, has seen the final one. They wouldn't even let the critics watch it, so who knows what they're doing with that. But I expect it to be like Serial 2.0. Like I read that, they're going to bring Jay's girlfriend out, his ex-girlfriend out to say he abused her. They're going to keep definitely going on with the Dawn theory. I think they're hoping that he dies soon so that it's easier to blame him and he can't even refute it. I'm just, more great guy Adnan stuff. And, I've heard them mention the word bombshell a couple of times, but I imagine that it's just the same stuff that we all have already heard over and over again.
Was it his lawyer or was it Colin Miller who said that they have a bombshell?
Well, Colin Miller said I think it's been almost like 3 years now, he claimed to have had a bombshell they couldn't talk about yet, but would be coming out in court, which never came out in court. So when Undisclosed did an episode about the HBO, when they're going to do, the Undisclosed team is going to do an episode about each one of the HBO episodes. So during the first one, they said, somebody asked Colin, is your bombshell in this documentary? What about your bombshell? And he says, I told the HBO people about my bombshell, but I don't know if it's going to make it into the documentary. So must be quite a bombshell.
It's such a bombshell that they prefer to tell a documentarian instead of submitting it to evidence in court. Such a bombshell, they're just going to let Adnan cool his heels in Max prison. Supermax prison.
We're going to wait. Hold on. Yes, we have this bombshell, but we need to wait for the HBO documentary to tell us first. Then we'll go and put it in court.
Right.
Please.
Just really quickly, we have 2 more minutes, but what is the difference between presenting evidence in a documentary and presenting it in court? And why do these innocence fraudsters love documentaries and podcasts?
Because it's not under any scrutiny. It can't be. These statements aren't being cross-examined by the other side. These statements, the people don't have to testify under oath. They could, just manipulate sound bites and documents. That's Rabia's favorite thing to do. Before, unfortunately, the transcripts were released by people from Reddit, she would just release little things that were doctored to make it look a certain way. But when you can't, in court, you can't do that. This stuff doesn't hold up in court, and that's why it's their favorite thing to just do documentaries and try to change the court of public opinion.
Well put. Alexa, thank you so much for talking with me about this. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me.